everyone. Welcome to today's event. We are joined again by Margaret Chamas, who was with us yesterday. Margaret has been involved with goats pretty much her whole life. She started in 4-H and then pursued animal science degrees at Cornell University and Iowa State, focusing on ruminant nutrition and grazing research. She runs Storm Dancer Farm in Smithville, Missouri, raising dairy goats for show, crossbred meat goats, and hair sheep for targeted grazing, and also has assorted equines and poultry. She also consults for Goats on the Go after managing 3 territories in the Kansas City region for several years. And she serves as the Livestock Viability Manager for Practical Farmers of Iowa. So she's maybe just a little bit busy.
Just a little.
Yesterday, if you were with us, Margaret talked about targeted grazing. And today she is going to talk about how you can make money doing all the things that all of our friends have undoubtedly told us we should do, like petting zoos, birthday parties, goat yoga, all the things. However, it is like most things, it's just not as easy as like hanging out a sign and starting to rake in the big bucks. Right, Margaret?
For sure. But it's an interesting proposition, and it's one I think everyone ought to at least like solidly consider at some point.
Yes.
Well, thanks for the intro, Deborah. And yeah, I call this talk Have Goats Will Travel, because that's essentially what it comes down to. There's my contact info. I'll have that at the end if folks want to reach out. I'm happy to talk all things goats all the time. Because yeah, like Deborah said, at this point I consider myself a professional crazy goat lady. Sheep are okay. I do love cows, and I love miscellaneous other animals as well, but the goats are the main one for me. And an additional part of my history that's relevant to today, I for a while worked on an agritourism farm, ag education teaching farm. I managed the barnyard full of animals, and so I really got a bit more heavily involved in formal agritourism at that point. And then after leaving there, but starting to do targeted grazing and doing some other work, that stuck with me. Because I started this targeted grazing business in 2018, and the premise of that is, I have my herd of brush goats. I go take them to other people's properties, and they eat brush, weeds, and whatever. And so inevitably, once I started doing that, people would call up or email me and say, "Hi, I'm not actually interested in goat grazing. I hear you do that. But what about goat yoga? Because you have these goats and you'll travel with them. Or can you come to my kid's birthday party? Could we come pet them?" People were asking for things other than the targeted grazing itself. And so after a while, I said, well, why not? Let's think about saying yes to these things. Okay, so the premise here and the math of this is fairly simple. People love goats. I assume most people here have goats, and so they probably are aware of how popular they are on social media, YouTube videos, Facebook Reels. People love goats, but not all these people can have them or probably should have them for various reasons. I do have goats, and I don't mind talking to people, dealing with people, or driving around a little bit. And so I can profit from this. So I started taking goat and animal-centric experiences off the farm to meet this niche or this need that was being expressed. So to use the official definition, agritourism does have a technical definition, or at least according to the National Ag Law Center, that does link it to the physical place, bringing people to the farm, ranch, or ag business. And so by doing this mobile stuff, it's hard to say if we're actually engaging in agritourism. I consider it agritourism, but for the most part, I'll just call this mobile experiences or something like that, because it may not always be considered agritourism. And one aspect where I'm finding that might matter more than I initially thought is insurance. And unfortunately, insurance is one of those things I will continue to bring up repeatedly today, and usually not in a positive manner. So this whole mobile agritourism thing, there's lots of demand for these experiences, this petting zoo, farm visit stuff, but just not at the farm itself. And if we are willing to go mobile, that offers us a lot of advantages, but there are some really serious and significant drawbacks, or at least considerations before jumping in. So why should you consider going mobile? Frankly, it's a fairly easy job, and the pay is quite good per hour. Once you get there and set up, a lot of times you are sitting watching your cute animals wander around, do their thing, watching people interact with them, and answering the same basic questions 5,000 times, like what's happening to their antlers, and why doesn't that one have ears? One thing I will note, I love my La Mancha cross goats. They're not my favorites for petting zoo events or events like this because I get tired of that question. By going mobile, you attract a broader audience and broader customer base. Notably, at least in my area, schools no longer have the budgets to take students anywhere. So remember, I manage the barnyard and educational farm / agritourism farm. Over the years I was there, we went from doing multiple school tours per day to barely doing a couple a week because the school districts didn't have the buses, the bus drivers, the assistants, the help, the money to even pay the $5 it would be per kid to get them into the petting zoo or to get them into, this farm tour. And so there was this kind of interest in, well, what if the farm could go to them? What opportunities would be brought up there? So again, if you are willing to travel, you have a broader customer base. Plus, there are parks and festivals and community events that love having animals there. It may actually be an insurance benefit if you are not doing this on your farm, because depending on your particular home, farm, whatever insurance, offering an event like this for pay may push you into a business type category that your home insurance isn't set up for, or it may not be covered under your farm insurance. There may be some liability there. And one of my biggest reasons, I do events on my farm, but one of the biggest things I like about the off-farm events are the boundaries. My farm looks like a farm. Most of the time, it's muddy, it's dirty, there's, scrap metal and scrap stuff sitting around. And I don't have to pretty it up every time I have an event if I'm doing the event somewhere else. It also allows for a lot more boundaries in terms of schedule clarity. If I'm doing an event from 2 or 4 p.m., I finish at 4 p.m., I pack up and I go home, and then I'm done, other than unpacking. There's no, okay, the on-farm open house was 2 to 4 p.m., but it's 4:15, and there's some people still kind of hanging out, and they're not taking the hint that you're trying to clean up and go back and have the rest of your day. So it allows some cleaner lines when you can very clearly say, nope, I'm no longer being paid, we're packing up, we're going. But why not go mobile? What are some of the disadvantages or considerations? The big one is that insurance and liability, because it's not always clear who is holding the insurance or the liability. Is it the landowner? Is it the host who invited you there? Well, what if the host is a community group that's having it in a public park? Does the park have to have the insurance coverage? And again, since this is now a business, it may require a separate and usually more expensive policy versus just your home or farm. So things to think about before you get into this. While it's nice to have the scheduling clarity and, this is when I'm working, this is when I'm not with mobile events, there's more work that goes into planning the logistics and the scheduling. Because that event from 2 to 4 p.m. isn't just the event from 2 to 4 p.m. It's the prep and planning, getting the truck loaded up before, it's the communication with the host, it's figuring out where you're going to park, where you're going to have the animals, what you're going to have. And when you start to talk about logistics, is the person you're planning with really aware of how much space a truck or trailer takes? Are they really evaluating well whether or not you can fit down a small city alleyway? I had an event, unless I truly misunderstood things, which is possible, they expected me to go down the wrong way, down a one-way only alley with my truck and trailer, which was not great for anybody. And then again, another reason to not go mobile might just be your personal preference, because this is a lot of peopling and a lot of public exposure. It is totally fair to say that you just don't want to deal with that much of the public. And if you do want to deal with general public members, you want it to be on your terms. You pick who you invite to your farm, let them, do whatever, come pet the goats, come help play with the babies, have some cuddles, and then leave. So some examples of mobile experiences that either I've done or friends of mine have done. Kind of the simplest one, and I had one last Saturday, birthday parties for kids or adults. People just love having the goats around, and it's a fun little addition to an event. Surprise parties or goatograms. I was asked to bring a goat into inner Kansas City and knock on somebody's door because the woman who hired me and this gentleman I was surprising had been working on like a children's book together, and they just finished it. And the book was about a goat, so she wanted Gertie the goat to go greet him. Goat yoga, and especially goat yoga that you don't have to host, is a mobile experience you can offer. Petting zoos. If you have more than goats, then do the whole, offer the whole shebang. Bring different types of animals, get more people more excited. Educational events, so more like that traveling farm zoo. I've also been asked to bring a couple of goats to, like a Girl Scout event or something and teach them about milking the goats, do some hands-on stuff. Photo shoots. Either later this month or early next month, I will be dropping off a few of my goat babies to a dear friend who is also a livestock owner. So she's responsible because she's a photographer and she's doing baby animal photo shoots right in time for Easter. Promposals. There have been a number of promposals in my network, thanks to some of our goats. An actual wedding proposal, I was not there. I didn't get to see it, but I helped make it happen in that I got the initial inquiry from someone who said, I'm looking for a goat in such and such area of Wisconsin because of this long-standing joke between me and my fiance. It was fabulous. She did say yes. And then videos. I've had goats be in a couple of different videos at this point. And, people generally just need an animal there to do a certain thing. So these are all things that people will pay you to do with your goats. And if you look at a number of these, not all of them actually require a ton of investment or infrastructure or even a ton of, time investment. So it is, again, this is something worth considering. This was the gentleman whose face is blown up on the right. So he's an employee at this company and he had met his sales target way early in the season. And he kept calling himself the goat because he made his sales target. So they decided to celebrate by having me bring some goats to the yard where they're having their staff party. This is one of my favorites of all time. The woman whose house this was at had traveled to Ireland and loved being in Ireland and seeing the sheep out on the moors. And so for Mother's Day, while she was out at church, her kids had arranged for me to sneak in behind her, after she left and drop off a bunch of goats or a bunch of sheep rather, traditional woolly sheep, like really classic looking. You can't see they're Icelandic. So some of them have nice, really cool horns. And then have them there for this Mother's Day party. And she nearly cried when she came back from church, looked out her back window and there were sheep there. I mean, it was just the most fun thing. This is actually a music video that one of my goats was in. The details are on the bottom. It is not safe for work. Be careful where you start playing this, but that is my goat in this rap video. It was an experience. I was off. I don't know if this is appropriate to say, but they offered to pay me in weed as well as cash. I took the cash. They tried to feed the goat weed. I said no. It was a thing. But it's a pretty great story to be able to go and tell. Okay, so considering these opportunities yourself, what do we try and think about? So I categorize jobs into a couple of different, general complexity categories. You have the really simple jobs. You need a couple of critters in a dog kennel, fits in the back of your minivan or your SUV. So stuff like your photo shoots, your go-to-grams really doesn't take a whole lot of time, a whole lot of planning, or a whole lot of animals. You get a bit more complex where you have small to moderate size petting zoos or those video appearances. I call videos a moderate complexity because while it usually seems to only be one or two animals, they often take more time because they want the animals to do a specific thing or look a specific way, or you might have to go to different locations for filming. So they add to the complexity more on the logistics and planning side. And then the most complex ones, once you start to get to that teaching farm sort of thing, you have to have the educational component as well as all the animals, all the infrastructure, all the setup. Pony rides, that's almost its own, that probably should be its own category because there's a whole new set of insurance and liability issues, but that definitely categorizes it as complex to me. And I call goat yoga complex because of just the neediness of some of the people who are doing it, frankly. And so again, generally as the complexity of a project increases, so does the infrastructure needed, the labor required, the insurance requirements, the planning, but also that increases the amount you can charge for these sort of experiences. So simple jobs, the good things about them is, like I said, there's very little invested. You probably have everything you need, and so it's more or less pure profit on your time. You take things you already need, you already have on hand, and you go do a thing that someone else is willing to pay you money for. It's beautiful. The problem is there's not always tons of demand for things that are very simple, and there's limits to how much you can charge just because it is by its nature fairly simple. I mean, I have a problem with chronic undercharging, I think, on a lot of things, but I really feel bad about asking for more than like $100 an hour to take 2 baby goats to a kid's birthday party, On the moderate complexity side, the pros are it still is not an excessive amount of investment. You are likely to have most, if not all, of the things on hand. They usually, the events themselves might be a little bit longer, but they're not usually much more complex on the planning side. Instead of just pulling up with a minivan, maybe you are bringing the truck and trailer and setting up some pens, but it's usually not a lot more than that. The planning time is the part that really creeps up on you, though. The event time might not. And so you need to think about when you're pricing or planning these out, making sure you're baking in that time for the planning as well as the actual launching and management of the event. And the complex projects. They're high demand. You can charge premium prices for these sorts of things, but this is where your expenses are going to go up as well. You might need new animals, more animals, different types of animals. You might need different or special types of equipment. The insurance gets a bit more hairy. You may need to hire additional labor for some of these, and the customers tend to be the more demanding or needy, depending on how generous I'm feeling on a given day. Okay, so one thing, I wasn't sure where to put these slides, so they ended up here where I'm talking about different types of projects. I've found an interesting line that I've had to walk between trying to read what people are actually wanting out of an event versus what they think they want in an event. To an extent, this plays into species selection. If you are a goat farm and that is what you have, it may not make any sense to add to your overall farm complexity by adding another species, but you may find that it's worth it if this traveling agritourism is something you want to do, if you keep getting requests for a specific animal. For me, it's poultry. I have 4 hens and 1 peacock. And the hens are not terribly friendly because I want them just to give me some eggs to eat. But everyone seems to want friendly chickens they can pet. And so I keep kind of kicking that can further down the road, but I really need to invest in a few super friendly birds who I can take that can be picked up and petted and all that sort of stuff, or continuously buying new chicks every couple of months. Also keep in mind, if you are really billing this as a petting zoo or a mobile barnyard, that kind of necessitates having a certain variety of animals and quantity of animals. So I'd say that my petting zoos have typically been around 4 species, and I'm starting to hit a point where there's enough other people in my area offering more species for a similar price that I'm going to have to step it up a little bit if I'm going to keep doing this. Another one, I will say, a lot of people say they want goat yoga, but they really don't. On the left is a goat yoga. It's the only group I actually really enjoy doing goat yoga for because I think they've figured it out. If you look at that picture on the left, you may be able to see that the yoga instructor and all the people are outside the goat pen, but there are some yoga mats inside with the goats. So what happens at this event is everyone's doing yoga outside, but every few minutes, 3 or 4 people cycle in with the goats, do a couple of poses with the goats. So they get that experience of being, climbed on and all those sorts of things, but not for the whole time. And when they come in to be with the goats, they hand me their phones. I take pictures of everybody. So they have those photos of them getting climbed on, interacting with the goats, but they didn't have to sit there and be pummeled by poopy little hooves for an hour. So this is the goat yoga I like, and it took us a little while to get to this setup, but it's been great. On the right is actually a local community college. They first had me out to do goat yoga. I tried telling them I really don't think your students want goat yoga. Apparently they had money from the fitness department, so they kind of had to do goat yoga, but they discovered after that first year that the students did not care about the yoga. They just wanted to go play with the little animals. And so now they tell me to bring the best variety of friendly animals I can. And they do this during finals week as a de-stressor for the students. So they thought they wanted goat yoga. They realized they wanted a petting zoo. I bet good money that 70% of people who think they want goat yoga really want just a petting zoo. And I'd rather do the petting zoos. So I actively try and convince them of that. But again, there are groups who are dead set on having that goat yoga. And so decide if you're willing to offer that, even if you know it's probably not what they really would best enjoy. Some necessities for success. Some of these things are physical, like the vehicles and the animals and the wet wipes. Others are less tangible. So it's things like your own traits and skills and attributes, policies and procedures, and things like insurance. Give Me Faith Farm, I saw your comment. I will be getting to that in a moment. So the material necessities. Animals. The animals had better be friendly, or at least not unfriendly. They'd better be healthy, because people do not like it, and you will get many comments so you can see that my goat kids have been not super recently disbudded, but they're at the stage where they're starting to scab up. I don't know how many times I hear questions about the scabbed up goat heads when I do this particular event. It's always around St. Patrick's Day, so that's always when I have month-old kids. But your animals had better be overall very healthy. And honestly, they better have names, or just make something up on the spot, because no one likes to think about the farm animals being so bereft of human attention that they don't have names. You also need equipment. So you'll need some sort of vehicle, obviously. But like I said, with a couple critters in a minivan, you may not need a trailer. Just depends on how big you plan on getting. And then you need some versions of portable corrals, pens, animal containment systems. So my favorites, I'll go through a few of these. Sorry to say, Give Me Faith Farm, I have no idea what those panels are, who makes them, or where they came from. I bought them secondhand from someone, and I've never been able to find anything like it since. I love them. They are lightweight. They are so easy to carry and move around. They are perfect for all this sort of stuff, and I cannot find any more of them ever, and it really upsets me. So number 2 there on the bottom, these folding Sidel panels, they are my replacement favorite since I don't have many other options. They come as hinged pairs. So they are not from Tractor Supply. They are not that heavy pipe with the mesh. They are way more lightweight and lighter duty than the Tractor Supply ones. At least I've never seen this sort of thing at Tractor Supply. Yeah, they're quite different. The Sidel panels have been a nice addition. One nice thing about them is they're a bit smaller. So the green ones on top are 8 foot long. The Sidel ones, I think, are 5 foot. I can actually ratchet strap them on the side of my trailer and then just pop them off the sides of the trailer very quick and easy. So that is a nice thing about them. These those little puppy panel sets that I find them on Craigslist and Facebook Marketplace fairly often. Grab some of those, because those go a long way for rabbits and some poultry and little goats. They are fantastic. They're cheap. They're lightweight. Grab some. And then pop-up tents, especially the ones with a floor, are great for birds. You do have to sit there and manage and make sure that people aren't, are leaving and zipping it back up. But if you want people to be able to get in with some of the animals, and not have to deal with, or if you have ones that are flying a bit better so they wouldn't be able to work with the puppy panels, the pop-up tents work pretty nicely. And here's some of my setups. Again, so the top right are those green panels. And again, I've never found them elsewhere. The wiring in the middle is actually fairly, I won't call it flimsy, but it's not super, super stiff. And so it's thin enough that most kids don't try standing on it. But it could support a little bit of weight if they tried. Top left, I have a large pop-up tent that I got, and I like that it's got the screen sides, so people can, so the animals can get a bit of a cross breeze when it's warm out. Side note, I had my rabbit in there that day. I don't recommend having the rabbit in there. He crawled out and we had to go chase him around. And then again, the side L panels on the bottom, and a couple different types of panels with my pony on the bottom left. We have a recommendation in the chat. I'm gonna have to check that out at some point. More material necessities, things for animal comfort and care. So depending on the duration of an event, plan on bringing water buckets, and you might need to plan on bringing your own water as well. Hay or feed if necessary, potentially bedding. I usually try and make sure my animals are on grass of some sort, so I don't usually worry about bedding, but that might be one you have to think about. And again, depending on the logistics, do you need to bring shade or shelter, or can you make sure to get under a tree? I recommend bringing fly spray or like SWAT fly ointment, because I've gone to, inner city areas and thought, oh, there's not going to be that many flies around here. It's not a farm. And the flies come out of nowhere. So bring the fly spray, bring the fly ointment. And I recommend bringing blue coat or some sort of wound spray that makes it pretty, that covers up any blood that happens to appear. So again, a fly bite, a scratch an animal gets on a panel. It very conspicuously hides the bright red of blood, but also makes it clear that you've done something about this animal's injury. And so it gives you a little bit of leeway if someone were to notice a minor injury on an animal and question about it. Some more material things. Signage. Have your farm name out there. Contact info so other people there can reach out and book you for their own parties. I have a question mark next to the warning or cautionary signs. I truly don't know this. So I have heard that you have to be careful of wording of, say, like livestock guardian dog warning signs, because if you straight up say like warning may bite, then it's considered, then you knowingly have an animal that is a threat to other people. And so I don't know if like, please don't put your fingers in, or watch out, we might bite, would be something you want to put on an animal pen for an animal that you've brought to a petting zoo. My first line of advice would be, don't bring an animal that you have to even worry about that with. But I don't know. I think that's probably up to every individual person and possibly their insurance provider, what sort of warning or caution signs may need to be required. And then you may want to do like little info placards or, stuff with QR codes so people can learn about the animals, things like that. For sanitation, I recommend bringing your own wet wipes, hand sanitizer, things like that for your attendees. Just that one extra little cover your butt in case anyone was, later on to complain about being sick. You tried to provide them with the best stuff you could. And then manure management supplies, so pitchforks, rakes, shovels. Also, just have twine, bungee cords, zip ties around, because you never know when that sort of thing might be necessary. And I highly recommend a camp chair because you might be standing out there or sitting out there for quite a while. So less tangible stuff, but still necessities for planning. Insurance. Farm Commons is one of my favorite references and resources for farm insurance, but really just you need to talk to your agent about what is or is not allowed, or you need to decide to what level you're going to be willing to risk it, or whether you're going to require your hosts to have insurance. I'm not a lawyer. I cannot give any advice on this other than this is probably going to be complicated. And again, the more complicated of an event you do, the more likely you will need to have something formal in place. So that petting zoo I do for the... Okay, so both of the pictures I showed, the one goat yoga that I think works really well, and the petting zoo at the community college, I have to provide them with my insurance information every year Sometimes there have been some cities that have required becoming additional named insureds on my policies for those events. So just a thing to be keeping in mind. Again, pony rides are their own special separate category. I will be honest, I do pony rides. I do pony rides as a subcontractor for someone else who has equine level insurance. I do not have pony ride applicable or equine activity insurance, but a friend of mine does. And so I do this as a subcontractor for her. So I'm covered under her policy. Licensing and permits. Do you need a business license? I don't know about most areas. So the Kansas City Metro is apparently full of a lot of small cities that want everybody to have a business license if they're doing anything in the city limits, even if it's a one-off event like this. So you may need a business license. Sometimes, for some of these events, you may need a special use permit or some sort of similar thing. If you are, if this is an area where farm animals usually aren't allowed, the rules may read that you have to have a special use permit to have them there. The question then becomes, who applies for the permit? Is that the host of the event, or is that you as the farm animal provider? I'm honestly not sure. And from what I understand, it probably varies by municipality. I will be honest, I've never filled out a special use permit form. I am operating under the assumption that, say I'm doing, that petting zoo at the community college, or that goat yoga event, things like that. I'm assuming that they've already had to get a special use permit to be doing the overall festival, and that they would have included me in that. I may end up regretting that, ignorance is bliss sort of attitude, but don't know. And then consider, for your own health and safety, your own peace of mind, and possibly other people's peace of mind, do you want to have vet papers on your animals before you take them out? It may be something that would make you feel more comfortable, or may make your customers more comfortable if you can say, nope, these animals are definitely clean of obvious communicable diseases. My vet has checked them recently. It's going to really add to the cost, but that might be something you want to consider. And I could totally see occasions where a really overzealous municipality might want to require it anyway. The same way they might require that all dogs have rabies vaccines. They want to know that all animals are free of transmittable diseases. Some internal and mental necessities. Yes, thanks, folks, thanks, Deborah, for clarifying. A CVI is a certificate of veterinary inspection. So that's meaning your vet has signed off and said, yep, the animals on this form are clean and clear of obvious communicable or transmittable diseases. They are good to travel. Some necessities that are more skills or attitude. You have to have a customer service mindset to do a lot of this stuff. You will get crazy questions and crazy ideas. And so be ready to roll with it and answer those questions politely, if not enthusiastically, all the time. You need to be able to plan the schedule. So Louise, COI, Certificate of Insurance, is something I often have to provide to the hosts of an event. But that's different from the CVI, which is what I specified on the last page. You need to be adaptable and to have some imagination. So again, the family who asked me to surprise their mother with a flock of sheep in her yard took a little bit of creativity to get that to work, and willingness to be there at a very specific time, get set up really, really quickly, and then drive off and hide in a local gas station until she arrived back, until I could turn around. So be willing to get creative, be flexible, and have fun with this. If you're going to do mobile events, and really any agritourism event, you need to love the public, or at least be able to fake loving the public and all their silly questions, and be able to answer them, again, kindly, politely, generously. You also need to be a real badass with a trailer, because you will be asked to go places that people may not have any right expecting a trailer to go. And one of the things that I find really helpful is think about these from the perspective of, number one, at least I get paid, and number two, at least this is going to make a really cool story I can tell somebody. Some policies and procedures. Things to at least think about beforehand and have an answer for, because they will be asked at some point. Can people go in with the animals, go in the pens with the animals? Can they feed them? What can they feed them? Can they go pick them grass or leaves off of, the trees or stuff nearby? Can they pick the animals up? Have a plan, have an answer, and have a consistent answer, at each given event. Sometimes it's different per event, but have those things, have an answer ready to go. And do some, I guess you could call it emergency planning, some what happens if scenarios. What if someone gets nipped by an animal? What if it was completely accidental, not their fault, the animal nipped them? What will you do? How will you handle it? What if someone got nipped or did anything that just didn't comply with your instructions? So they went in with an animal you said not to. They stuck their fingers too far back in the goat kid's mouth, thinking it was funny, it was sucking on their finger, and then they got bitten by those razor molars. How are you going to handle that? Just have a thought for how you will address those things in the moment. Luis is asking a question. What's the name of insurance policy? There's not going to be a single policy. Again, you're going to have to talk with your insurance agent because you may need a commercial policy on the business. You may need just like a specific event rider for the event that day. So you are the best bet if you want to do this in terms of getting insurance coverage. Call your insurance agent, tell them what you plan on doing, and see what they say. There is not a single coverage for this that I am aware of. Let's talk booking. Carol made a good point, and that's where we start to go with this. How do people book? How far in advance can they book an event? How far in advance do they have to book an event? Can they do it a week before, a day before? Will you require a deposit? What's your booking procedures? How does someone get on your schedule? Those are things to think about. It could be by email. Maybe it is by phone call. There are some parts of the country where people are so good about handshake deals that it works. I prefer having it at least documented, even if I don't have a deposit. But think about these sorts of things as you're planning out how you're going to, integrate this into your farm or business. That last bullet point's an important one, though. How and when are you getting paid? If you are going to accept credit cards, then that's an additional set of software and stuff you have to have ready and able. If you are expecting a check, a lot of organizations may not be able to pay you at the time of an event. So some municipalities are only going to cut checks every couple of weeks when they have, a board meeting or something. So be aware of and upfront with your contacts about how and when you expect to be paid, and then understand their processes and realize that it might be, okay, we cut checks on the 15th of the month, so it will be a few days after your event, but then you'll get it by mail. Think about cancellations and refunds. What if the host event is canceled for any reason? So you're bringing a petting zoo to a community festival. What happens if it is canceled and so therefore you're canceled? Often that's a weather-related thing. But what if the weather is bad, like say it's too hot and you want to cancel because it's not safe for the animals? Think about this up front, and I would say discuss these sorts of things during the planning process. I'll talk a bit about my personal policies later on, but these are things that have all happened to me. What happens if there's a specific animal that people wanted? Another one I get requests for is my mini donkey. Everyone loves having the mini donkey. The mini donkey hates it. She will tolerate it, but only barely. What if she was to get sick one day and I couldn't bring her to an event where they'd really been banking on that? I have a mental plan for how I would work through that situation, and I encourage you to do the same. Still talking planning, the logistics. Who's responsible for manure management? If anybody. If you're on the grass, does anyone care if you leave some goat pellets there? If you're doing pony rides, are you expected to pick up, the big manure plops? Talk about that up front so that no one's surprised later. Another one I found to be more complicated than you think, arrival and setup time versus the start time of the event. So my policy is that if the event is from, 4 to 6 p.m., I will be there and set up by 3:45, 15 minutes ahead of time. But I've had some folks want me there. Oh no, setup is between 9 and 9:30. The event doesn't start till 10. Well, then that just goes into my, you're paying me to be there at that point because you want me there earlier than I need to be. So, maybe that bakes into or goes into your price a little bit. Talk about parking. Ideally, I'd recommend looking at a Google Earth map of the area and trying to figure out where you're going to set up. I mentioned the woman that I do pony rides on contract for. One of the things she's really good about is screenshotting the area, drawing in a map. Come in this way, turn from this street onto this area. You will park at this X in between these two trees. She's done enough maneuvering with enough much bigger trailers than me that she's very good about making sure that these customers understand the space limitations of a trailer and have the space to deal with it. Talk about location requirements. Do you need shade? Do you need to be by trees? Are you going to require that you're on grass or request that you're on grass? Do you need, what else is going on? And do you need to be far away from it? So I had an event. I was doing baby goats and a friend of mine was doing pony rides, and they had us sandwiched in between a classic car show. So a lot of hot rods revving constantly, and between carnival rides that were extremely noisy. The horses did not love it. Now, she's got really, really good horses, so they didn't buck, they didn't kick, they didn't freak they didn't flip anybody off, but they were not happy, and the stress was getting to kind of everyone. My baby goats absolutely hated it. It was kind of awful. And so the next year, we spoke to them about it, and the next year we removed a little bit. Some planning considerations that I have found in particular with goat yoga. Be clear on what services you are offering. I, at least, am offering goat services. I bring the goats. I bring the things to keep the goats in. I am not instructing the yoga. I'm also not finding the instructor. I'm not setting up the event space beyond whatever containment for the baby goats. I'm not bringing yoga mats. And I'm also not signing up attendees. I had one group want me to do goat yoga with them. And I gave them my rates, which are hourly. And they said, well, we were going to give you a certain percentage of however many slots we filled. And I said, absolutely not, because it's costing me the same thing to come out here, whether you have 2 attendees or 20 attendees. And so I said, what I did for them is I said, I will kind of stretch my normal cancellation window. We are going to check in on such and such a date. And if you decide that you have enough people to make it worthwhile, then we'll do it. And if you don't, then we won't. And I won't, charge you for that cancellation. I said, but I expect to get paid this much to be doing this for you. So yeah, that one's really one I've had mostly with goat yoga. I suppose I could see it go to some other things, but goat yoga seems to be the one where that happens the most. And let's talk pricing. There are no right or wrong answers. I will share my examples, but again, this is just to give you an example, not to tell you this is the norm or this is what you should do. At a baseline, though, this should be covering your time and at a high enough rate that it's worth also covering the time that you spent loading up the truck and trailer and getting the animals all loaded up and making sure everything was clean. So consider that extra time that you're not directly billing to the customer. Make sure you're covering your mileage, depending on where this is, and make sure it's covering, a portion of whatever insurance costs you may have. At the end of the day, there are days that I've been sitting there for 5 hours answering the same question endlessly, and it's kind of boring. And maybe it's hot, or maybe it's a bit too cold. But at the end of the day, if I say, you know what, I'm getting paid X $100 for this, and that sounds all right, make sure it is worth losing that day at home or day of work or project time, whatever you could have been doing on the farm to get the paycheck from that. And if at the end of the day you agree, yep, this was worth it, then I think your pricing's doing all right. So again, here's my approximate pricing structure. Again, just an example. Those easy little gigs where it's me and a couple of baby goats, maybe my rabbit in the minivan, $100 an hour base with a minimum of 30 minutes. And I'll increase that a little bit if I have to bring more animals, just because it's more things for me to wrangle. And I charge $50 a mile round trip. 50 cents a mile round trip. Holy moly. I'm sorry. Gas isn't that bad yet. As soon as I have to hitch up a truck and trailer, the price jumps up significantly. And so there I go to $250 for the first hour, which includes the setup time, if the setup time is reasonable. So again, if they want me there 30 to 60 minutes before the event officially starts, nope, they're paying me for some of that. But if the event is from 1 to 3 p.m. and they need me there, as long as I'm ready by 1, I'm good, then that $250 covers the first hour of actual event time. And I'm not charging for whatever setup time I had on the front end. And then I charge a little bit less per hour after that, because usually once it's set up, I am mostly just standing and monitoring and answering questions. So it does cost to continue to be there, but not like it costs to set up. And then I charge more for mileage there because the truck and trailer is a lot more expensive to drag around. Some things that will affect my pricing, though, if it's a holiday. I've been doing an Easter Sunday event the last few years, and you better bet that one's a pretty penny more expensive than my regular basic rates, even though I'm, usually just taking my minivan. Or is it an otherwise high demand day? It's a certain time of year or a certain community period where things are going on. Do I need to hire help, or do I need to borrow animals from someone else? Best thing I think you can do in this industry, or if this is an enterprise you're looking at going into, but you say, I'm not sure I have enough animals or the right type of animals, find someone else who does. I have a wonderful relationship with a friend a couple miles down the road from me. I love goats. I tolerate sheep. She loves sheep. She likes goats, but her husband barely tolerates goats. So I have my bottle baby goats every year. She has her bottle baby sheep every year, and we borrow from each other when we need extra animals. I've got a bottle calf now, but she got one a year or two ago, so I could use hers. She has camelids. I will not ever have camelids. We can exchange animals as needed to kind of fill gaps in our offerings. And that is such a wonderful relationship to have. We also bounce jobs to each other. If I'm booked on a weekend, I'll send the people her way and vice versa. It's been very worth it. We also know that we're within spitting distance of each other's prices, so we're not directly undermining each other. And people aren't going to try and like price us against each other. So if you can get a partnership like that, I highly recommend it. Anyway, back to pricing. Like I said, I mentioned my feelings on having to be there a long time before the event starts. And I'm going to charge for that because that impacts everything else. That impacts the time I have to milk in the morning and time I have to get things loaded up. So I'm going to charge if they want me there extra early. And then, do I need to clean up afterwards? If I'm just doing a simple sweep up of any giant pony-sized manure patties and heading out, great. But if they want me to be raking up, if they had me on concrete and I have to have all the straw, all the mulch, all the manure off of it, it's going to be added into the price a little bit. So a couple of samples of what my projects will look like. So a simple project, that really easy one, kid's birthday party at the house. This is what I did last weekend. Equipment-wise, I have my minivan. I've got a little puppy play yard and some wet wipes. I'm bringing a handful of goat kids and probably a rabbit or a chicken. Again, something fairly simple. These events usually 1 to 2 hours, and I'll be charging 100 to 125 an hour, just depending on exactly what sort of animals and how, needy the people are. The planning schedule, people will email me or even text me days to weeks to months in advance. We're usually checking in the week of just to make sure the weather looks good, make any final adjustments. I don't require deposits for this, but they have received a formal written quote from me at this point. And especially with weather, I'll reschedule up to the day of the event and not penalize them for it. Like we've said, there's been so many times. This one family I was at last weekend, the one kid's birthday is around the end of February. And so we're always doing a birthday party at the beginning of March. And early March weather is so variable that there have been times we've pushed it off a week or two just because. And I'm generally doing no manure management at these. A moderate project. Excuse me a second. All right, so this is the student stress relief petting zoo at the community college. Again, even though I'm bringing a bunch of animals and a bunch of equipment, I still consider this only moderate complexity because it's still fairly simple. I've got my truck and trailer. I've got 8 to 10 corral panels of various shapes, sizes, and configurations, and the puppy play yard. I am going to bring some water and water buckets, hay feeders, and then wet wipes or hand sanitizer, just to encourage everybody to stay clean. I may bring more goat kids than this, but I'm bringing goat kids, maybe some lambs. I'll bring one of my equines, either the mini donkey or my pony, some chickens or poultry, the rabbit, and bottle calf. And so these are usually 1 to 3 hours. You know, they want kids to be going, coming by and stopping in as they go in between classes, that sort of thing. And so I'm charging $250 for that first hour and then a little bit less per hour thereafter. These are planned usually a little bit further in advance, weeks to months. This would be a really hard one to plan, you know, days to a week in advance. And then again, email reminders and check-ins the week leading up to it. I usually don't require deposits, especially since some of these groups, their accounting system won't allow for it, but they usually have, again, they want my insurance information, and then they may have a contract that I'm required to sign, just indicating that I will provide these services at this, you know, dollar value on such and such date. I am usually willing to reschedule these up until the moment I start loading the truck. So again, there have been a couple of times when the weather's looking questionable. If I haven't invested any time into it and it's truly a questionable weather day, it's not like I could have had another job lined up. So I don't fault them for that. But the times where I've been about halfway ready and almost getting in the vehicle and someone said, well, we might need to push it off, then you're going to be paying for me for at least the time I've already invested. And I may or may not be willing to reschedule for you. And I'm usually not doing a ton of manure management here. Again, pony piles maybe, but you know, usually not goat berries. So more complex stuff. Pony rides and petting zoo for a community fair. So now I'm bringing the same stuff, the truck and trailer, the corral panels, buckets, hay feeders, but now I also need the saddles, the pads, the mounting block. I do definitely bring manure scooping supplies because oftentimes we'll be walking on roads or asphalt. And then in addition to all the corral panels for the animals, you also need other human corralling things. So make a lane that people can line up in before they get on the, you know, get to the ponies. Make sure there's a clear line that they should not cross until they are told to. Special instance here, I'm going to be bringing other employees. I do a lot of this on my own, maybe have a 4-H'er helping me for some of these. But if I'm doing pony rides, then I need other people. And so I have to bake in the cost of their wages as well, and often their travel time. So that ups the cost quite a little bit, which you can see under the duration. These usually minimum of $300 for the first hour, and then a minimum of $150 per hour after that. Now, I describe kind of what my planning and booking schedule is for complex projects. Again, since I do my pony ride jobs, subcontracting for someone else, I have to work with her planning and scheduling process. So this is actually kind of a blend between the two. So she does require deposits. Events are not booked until she has that deposit received. And then that does limit our ability and willingness to reschedule, because usually she has a lot of events lined up. And if they are canceling, you know, it's hard to back out of that much movement around of animals and people. But, you know, it depends on the particulars of the situation. And again, I won't usually do manure pickup for the general livestock, but for the ponies, I will. Another slide, I wasn't sure exactly where to fit, but I'm going to throw it here. On the particular subtopic of traveling farm, educational farm experiences, there's this company called Barnyard Discoveries in Peoria, Illinois, that was trying to basically franchise this setup. So this is a really cool self-contained trailer. You can see on the bottom right, they've got an ADA accessible ramp so people can wheelchair up into that and then out the side. They have individual pens for all the animals. They have informational placards up on the walls. They've got some TV screens showing, educational stuff about farming and agriculture. The animals never have to leave. So it is the only weather limitations to this one are when it's too hot. And they do have a bit of an AC system, but it just can't keep up when it's too hot. So this is a really cool system and a really cool way of doing it, because 1 or 2 humans can man this thing with minimal extra effort. And again, it's self-contained. So it's really, really, really slick. Last I heard, a trailer kit like that was in the $25,000 range, and that was in $2020. So it frightens me to think of what it would be now, but the idea is really, really, really phenomenal. And I know that they have huge unmet demand. And I think something like that would be very popular in a lot of areas, because like I said, as much as I think everyone would love to be able to bring students and children out to the farm, it's becoming such a hard thing to do in the current state of school systems and school budgets, that it's not likely to happen. So this would be an excellent way to capitalize on it. From what I know, again, this was 2020 or 2021 dollars. They were charging, I want to say it was maybe $600 for the first 2 hours of an event. I think that was their minimum duration. If you think about that, $600 is not a small amount of money, but if they went to a school, you could get every class going through that barn. And so the per student cost goes down significantly. So again, cool source of inspiration or ideas. I met the original owner of Barnyard Discoveries, but he's since sold it and retired. And so I don't know the current people running it. I can't speak to them or their qualifications or anything, but just, I love the idea. I think it's a really neat thing. And with that is my set of slides. There's a screenshot of my current farm website describing my rough pricing structure. And with that, I'll check through the list and see if I had any questions, or people can keep popping them in. Lost my cursor. There it is.
What was the yesterday you mentioned some insurance companies for
for the targeted grazing. Yeah. So I have no idea how easily applicable any of them would be for this sort of business, but Farm Bureau is a good one to check. And American National was the other one who I spoke to, at least about the targeted grazing, and they thought it was something they could work with.
Okay. The other thing that worked for us when we couldn't find insurance was we found another farm in our area that was doing what we wanted to do, and we asked them. And then we went to their insurance company, and it worked.
Give Me Faith Farm says, also when we start talking about liability, the big signs on the gate saying the farm is an agritourism site, come at your own risk. Yeah, and I know at least in some states they have those signs, especially for under Missouri law, an equine professional is not responsible for injuries associated with it being an equine event. And I know Missouri will do that for agritourism as well. To what extent those actually, hold up in court is anyone's guess. But it does, some of it at least, we hope, is simply making people think about their actions. And so I think it would certainly help with that, in a little bit of cover your rear.
Does anybody else have any questions? This has been amazing. It's funny that I'm in shock at how detailed you got in this amount of time. This was really great. You brought up so many things.
It is deceptively simple, and it's stuff like the birthday parties. I think it is super simple. And I think it can just be as simple as you have these baby goats, you take them to someone's party and you charge them $100. Like, I think there's nothing wrong with that level of it staying that simple. But yeah, inevitably you have, or you will get the questions about, what about goat yoga? What about this? And so a lot of this, good or bad, has, a lot of these details have arisen from things I've actually encountered, like I'm loading up the trailer and someone wants to cancel the event, or I don't want to bring my animals out in the 42 degrees and pouring rain. So my advice to everyone else is think about it before you hit that point, like I did.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think you just did such an amazing job that everybody is trying to soak it all in and think about what they want to do.
Oh, great question. Give me Faith Farm. When they want baby goats at a party, but baby goats are out of season. Yeah. I do make that part of my communication with customers. When they start asking me about things, I say, okay, baby goat season is this time of year. And actually, it's probably something I should add to the website. I have, so there was another college that wanted me to do a goat yoga. And actually, I did do it twice, I think, in August for their returning students event. I was like, they're not babies then, right? Like, I have standard sized goats. They're going to be like 50 to 60 pounds. Yeah, setting those expectations early. I will still usually be more than happy to bring them a cute, friendly animal or 2 or 5. But we just have to, they have to understand that it's a seasonal thing. Yep. I can't say I've had anyone like cuss me out and refuse to, and get really ticked off because the baby goats weren't in season anymore. Some disappointment. Usually they're at least moderately interested in still having young goats out there. But yeah, be clear about when they're no longer babies.
One of our goats was in a TV commercial a few years ago.
That's awesome.
And they contacted me. Because they wanted it in the TV commercial. They were going to have a person doing goat yoga, and so of course they wanted a baby goat standing on the person's back. And this was fall, and I'm like, there are no babies this time of year. And so they put the goat on a green screen, standing on a green box in front of a green screen, and they shrunk her down.
I love that. I love that.
Yeah. And another one of my goats did I don't know, I was telling somebody about this not too long ago, and she said she found the video on YouTube. There's this, and I actually did not know when I said yes, there's some a dog puppet that insults people.
Oh no.
And when the Chicago Cubs were in the middle of, breaking the Billy Goat curse, this insulting puppet comic, they wanted a real goat to insult. And I was going to be out of town. So I had my son do it. He's in his 20s. Honestly, I'm glad he did it because I saw the video and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad I wasn't there. And I am so glad that goat does not understand words. So people will ask you to do some strange things. But for TV stuff, a lot of times you get paid several hundred,
right.
Several dollars. So
yep. Yeah, it's just all those picky things. Like it has to be this type of goat or look this particular way. And it needs to do this specific thing that goats may or may not want to do.
Yeah. Yep. So, all right. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for coming today. Tomorrow, we actually have 2 different talks. The first one at 11 a.m. is going to be about turning your farm into a nonprofit. And then the one at 2 o'clock in the afternoon is about starting a goat dairy. And we've got 2 different speakers tomorrow. So you'll get your links about an hour before the lectures start. So I will see all of you then. Bye.